I'm Nat.
And I'm Guy.
And well, the Paris Olympics start today, but not without quite a few controversies that have already started happening. Let's start with the Seine River, where a lot of the athletes are supposed to compete in swimming and other water-based activities. Well, the water they'll be swimming in is still apparently full of E. coli, even though there were huge efforts and a lot of expenses done to essentially clean up the river. So much so that Macron had promised to swim in it with the Paris mayor, but Macron said that he will swim in it at a later date, but the Paris mayor did swim in it and we haven't heard of her since. So hopefully we'll see some of the athletes come back out and not be terribly sick or get something worse like MRSA. Secondly, well, they had a little bit of a moment with somebody very special carrying the Olympic torch during its final leg coming into Paris, which was not a woman and a man, but a man dressed as a woman. So a drag queen, they decided, would be the best representation of an athlete who is probably not even involved in any sports, but he was allowed to carry the torch probably because, well, Macron wanted somebody to remind him of his wife during the ceremonies. And lastly, well, France is going through a huge immigration crisis, and even though Macron and France has spent about 10 billion euros trying to clean up the city and make a very secure and safe zone, well, the Australian cyclist team already had their van vandalized and a lot of their equipment stolen, and nobody wants to talk about, well, the big elephant in the room, which is the giant immigration and safety crisis going on in France at the moment.
Well, we do know that Paris and the Olympic Committee have banned Russia and Belarus from competing in the Olympics.
These Olympic Games should be an opportunity for the IOC to reaffirm and demonstrate its respect for its own human rights policy. Wayne Jordash, president of the international human rights organization Global Rights Compliance, from Reuters publication.
In February 2024, the Ukrainian Olympic Committee asked the International Committee to investigate the participation of Russian and Belarusian athletes in connection with the alleged violation of neutrality. Ukraine made every effort to have these athletes suspended.
We found photos of athletes performing, for example, against a Z swastika background at some propaganda concerts or at tournaments in honor of the occupiers. We collected folders, papers and photos. In the end, we have a fantastic result: 20 times fewer Russian citizens than at the previous Olympic Games. That, I think, is worth a lot. Serhiy Bykov.
Now, does this mean that all the Russian and Belarusian athletes are not going to be able to compete? No, the Olympic Committee has been gracious enough to allow these about 50 athletes to compete if they're willing to disavow their country and not agree with the Russian-Ukrainian war, which is absolutely ridiculous considering when the U.S. was at war in Afghanistan and Iraq, no athletes were banned. And Israel is currently at war and none of their athletes are banned. So I guess this is just a little bit hypocritical. Now, other than the athletes, we're also having physiotherapists, journalists, and anybody connected to the athletes being banned from France at this point.
Well, I mean, they could be spies.
Well, that's actually what they're saying. We'll add a clip in here at some point. Now, if you've watched any Western media, you've probably seen Macron saying that Russia is planning a cyber attack against France during the Paris Olympics. These claims are absolutely baseless, and they're not willing to share any evidence other than Russia is bad, they're mad we banned them from the Olympics.
Back in April 2024, French President Emmanuel Macron stated that Russia, along with Islamic radicals, could also pose a threat to Olympic Games. According to Macron, there is no doubt that this country is using the competition at least for an information attack on France. This is what the increased security measures are related to.
There are a number of threat actors who may have had an interest in jeopardizing the Olympic Games or using them as a platform for their messages. One of the main ones is, of course, the Russian Federation. They can't have their athletes participate under the country's name. They're under sanctions of many countries because of their activities in Ukraine and other countries, and so it can be an issue of political interests and a reason reason for them to attack. Eugene Spafford.
What we do know is Zelensky and Ukraine are losing the war. Joe Biden is stepped down, and he was the biggest Ukrainian supporter financially and otherwise.
I mean, we wonder why.
Yeah, I mean, Trump and JD Vance are most likely going to win the election, and they're vehemently against the Ukrainian war. If we know this, Zelensky has to know this, and knowing this, he's recently started to wanting to negotiate an end to this war. This is something NATO and the EU does not want.
Yeah.
Now, a cyber attack that the West can blame on Russia, this would be the perfect opportunity for NATO and the EU to step in and take control of the war, stop all negotiations. Now, why would they want this? They could potentially want to bring in a CBDC by collapsing the euro dollar on the back of the Ukrainian war. And I guess that's about it.
Yeah. So, well, we hope you enjoy the bits of the opening ceremony that are tolerable to anybody with a brain. And we'll see you soon.
And thanks for listening to me stutter like Joe Biden. Adios.